Good component use can make or break a project. Here's 5 essential tips for Webflow components. The first key is to name our components in an easy to find way. I can search for section / to see all my reusable section components. I can filter it down further by the type of section. These are all my different hero sections. I might also want to grab a section that lists some things out. Maybe it's a list of text links that I can use right here. And maybe under that, I'll grab a section that has a scroll interaction, and I'll grab this vertical kind of scroll interaction here. And maybe under that, we have sort of a traditional sort of content section. I'll grab this column ones. And inside each section, we can have global components that are used across multiple sections. So if I search for global /, these are all my global elements. I might grab this image and video wrapper, and inside this side, I might have my global sort of eyebrow, move that up to the top like so. And maybe inside this button wrap, I can search for BTN. These are all my different types of buttons, from arrows, play buttons, text links, anything else. I can switch the style over. And inside each component, we also have maybe this icon, and this is a play icon. It's just set to be 100% width and height of its parent. And that way I can drop this component inside anything and set the size from the parent div. So if I just search icon /, these are all the reusable icons I can have throughout my site. The second key is to use rich text elements to make our components more flexible, at least until component slots are released. So we can give our rich text a class, and then we can style all lists that are inside of this particular class, and we can remove the bullets from it, remove the padding. We can style all items that are inside of this class to have some padding and some border, maybe all bold text inside of this class to have some bottom margin. So we can really start to develop whatever card styling we like here, and it just makes our entire component a bit more flexible, because when we go to edit this, we can easily add a new item to this list by hitting enter, giving this a heading, and then shift enter to create a new line. We'll call this paragraph. We can just bold the heading, and that'll apply the styles we want, the margin, and now we've added a new item to our list. The same thing can be done with images to create cards by setting our entire rich text to flex and wrap, and we can use the image caption to create the card headings, so we can add however many we want, like so. And even the images themselves can be set to link to a certain page or a site, and the text as well can be set to link if we'd like. We can use inline styles to make our components more flexible. On any normal Webflow element like this H2, style is a reserved keyword and it won't let us type it all. But on the custom element, nearly all those HTML attributes are unlocked. So I can set this to a tag of H2, plug in the text, and then I can add style. And I can add any CSS just like I would inside an embed. So color red, maybe max width of 17 ch. Maybe I can even update the value of a Webflow variable here. So theme text, I can set that to black or whatever I want. Now from here, I think I'm just going to plug the max width for now. And let's go ahead and link this to a component field. And I'll call this something like heading max width. So if I create and I head to the entire parent, the component, now I have this heading max width property here, and I can put this inside a group called heading, and I can even drag to reorder groups like so, but I'm going to grab this and link the text of it to a field as well, and I want it to go in that same group. So I'll say heading / I'll call this heading text. Now if I create, I have a heading text inside my heading group, and I can even drag to reorder this, put the text at the top. Let me go ahead and delete this. I have this entire container here, which is a custom element set to div. And I might want this to have a min height of 100 SVH sometimes, so it fills the screen. Other times I might want it to hug the content. So to do that, I can add an attribute of style, and I can give this a min height. And I'll just set whatever I want the default to be here. I think in my case, I want them to span the full screen height in most cases. So I'll set that there. And then I can link this to a field. I have a group already called section styles, and I'll just call this min height. And now I can create, and I can use the same component in multiple ways. So if the client adds some other words here, and now I have this orphan at the bottom, I can loosen up or tighten up my max width to get this looking right. And the important part about inline styles is we can't change them across breakpoints. But for something like this, 15ch is based on the size of the font itself. So when the font size changes, this max width will just scale with it. And same thing for my section styles. I can change this to 0VH and it'll just hug the content. Another tip is to store any JavaScript for this component inside the component itself. That way we can have this component on any page. We don't have to worry about if the script's there, and the script won't be added to pages that don't use the component. And I like to store the component in its own sub sort of script component here. That way if I need to unlink the main component to change collection filtering or anything like that, the script itself can still be updated globally. And in case we have multiple of these quote sections on the same page, when we loop through each section, we're going to make sure the script hasn't been added yet by checking for this class. And if not, we'll add the class so the script doesn't run twice. And then any of our scripts can just go there, whether it be our slider or anything else. We can also adjust styling and functionality of any element from data attribute values. The Lumos Chrome extension can automatically create these buttons for us to make attributes easier to use. We can apply custom attributes to any element we'd like, and we can name the attributes whatever we'd like. It's best to start with data dash to distinguish them from regular HTML attributes, but I could call this data dash animate. Sometimes I want all of these components to animate by default, but on certain pages I might disable the animation with JavaScript. So I could pass in true or false, whatever I want the default to be, and then I could link this to a component field on my whole section. I'll just call this animate. I could call this whatever I'd like. And as long as the Lumos extension detects the word true or false in this field, it'll automatically add these true or false buttons for us to make it easier. In my Webflow variables, I have things like my nav height plus some padding. I have things like my section padding, top and bottom, or left and right. And the client or anyone could come in here and switch out the value being used for a large section padding. These values auto reduce on each breakpoint, and it would update everywhere large padding is used throughout the site. Now, to link these two data attributes, I can just copy the name of the variable from here, and we can head to an embed. The Lumos Chrome extension looks for any embeds that are inside a div with the class of page code wrap. So as long as my embeds are inside that div, it can pick up the attributes I put in these embeds. To create an attribute, we add straight brackets, and I can call this whatever I'd like. I'll call it data padding top. I'll say whenever the value of that attribute is set to large, I can add my own CSS. I'll set the padding top on that element to be my large Webflow variable. And I can do the same thing, but for bottom. So whenever I have a data padding bottom attribute with a value set to large, I'll set the padding bottom on that element to be my large variable. And I can build out a whole system with this, connecting small to a small variable, main to a main variable, and so on. As well as just the section top and bottom variables, I can even create unique ones. Like I have this data padding top. When the value is set to even, I'll set the padding top on my section to be equal to the left and right padding of that section. So if I ever want the top or bottom to match that left and right padding, I can throw that in. I'll also create a unique one just for nav. So whenever this is at the top of the page, I could set a value of nav, and that'll set the padding top on the section to be the nav height. Now, the order that these attributes are displayed in this embed is the order that these buttons will be created on the component. So in my component, on my container element here, I can add a data padding top, and when the value is set to none, that'll just be none. If it's set to even, that'll just match the side paddings here, but I'll just set my default to be main. And then I have a data padding bottom, and that controls the bottom padding like so. So I can go ahead and link these to component fields after I set my default value. I'll want this to go in my section styles sort of grouping, and the name of this component prop needs to include the name of the attribute I'm linking this to. So I'll call this padding top. If I was applying this attribute to this card element here, I could call it something like card padding top. In this case, I put it on the section. I'll call it section padding top. This part doesn't really matter. It's just this part that needs to match the data attribute name so it can pull those buttons dynamically. Let's go ahead and create. And on this one, we'll link it to a field. We'll call this section padding bottom, and we'll go ahead and create. And just like that, we now have these buttons where I can set the top to none, large, even, nav, anything like that. And I have separate buttons here for the bottom that can control that as well. And if I ever add new attributes or new values to the embed, those buttons will be automatically added across every section I could have throughout my site.